Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we'll be exploring the world of microbes and how we perceive them. I'm really excited to dig into this one because we've got some really interesting sources to work with,
That's right.
including some translated clips from a video all about germophobia. We'll be taking a close look at all of that today.
Yeah.
But first, have you ever actually stopped to think about all the microbes that are probably just hanging out on your phone right now?
It's kind of wild when you actually think about it, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
often have this perception of microbes as these harmful invaders, which is
Yeah.
totally understandable. It's where this idea of germophobia comes from.
Right.
The video you sent in even showed people wrapping their remotes in plastic to avoid germs, like really taking it to the next level.
Oh yeah, some serious commitment there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's easy to forget that the vast majority of microbes are actually harmless.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, a lot of them are super important for our survival.
Exactly. That's a really key point. For example, the microbes in our gut, right? They're helping us break down food, absorb nutrients.
Oh yeah?
We wouldn't be able to digest properly without them.
Right.
And even beyond our own bodies, microbes play such a crucial role in the environment as a whole. They break down organic matter, help cycle nutrients in the soil, even contribute to the production of oxygen.
It's like we're living in this incredible invisible ecosystem where microbes are like the unsung heroes keeping everything running smoothly.
I like that unsung heroes.
But the video did bring up something kind of mind-blowing. It mentioned that if all the microbes suddenly vanished, humans would actually be okay for a while, but the planet itself
Yeah.
would experience a total ecosystem collapse.
Yeah, that's right. It really highlights just how interconnected everything is, and it all comes back to this natural aversion we have to things that could potentially harbor harmful microbes, which is disgust. It's like this deeply ingrained evolutionary response that helped keep our ancestors alive.
Fascinating, isn't it? It makes you wonder, though, where that line is, between healthy caution and full-blown germophobia.
Mm.
The video mentioned Nikola Tesla, brilliant inventor,
Of course.
but also notoriously a germaphobe.
He was. The video mentioned that his fear of germs became much more intense after seeing a drop of water under a microscope.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the things he must have seen?
I can only imagine. I think there was even a quote in the video where he described the microbes as hairy, hideous creatures killing each other and spilling their bodily fluids.
Yeah, talk of a vivid image,
Yeah.
right? A little unsettling. But what I find fascinating is how this totally natural disgust response, which is usually helpful, can become a phobia.
Like it did for Tesla.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He ended up wearing gloves all the time, refused to shake hands, went to extreme lengths to purify his water.
It really makes you think about the power of perceptions, doesn't it? And
Ah.
speaking of perceptions, the video brought up another historical figure,
Okay.
a much more unsettling one, Adolf Hitler. And it seemed to imply a connection between his germophobia and, well, his actions. Which, I mean, it's a sensitive topic.
It is. It is. And we need to be extremely careful about, drawing any direct connections, especially with such a complex historical figure. But the video does bring up some interesting points.
Yeah, like how Hitler often used language that dehumanized entire groups of people,
Yeah.
referring to them as parasites or viruses that needed to be eradicated.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if his worldview was at least in some way influenced by this fear of contamination, this
Yeah.
germophobia.
It's certainly something to consider, and it raises a question that's relevant to all of us. If disgust is this natural hardwired response, how do we recognize when it's serving a protective purpose and when it's crossing the line into something more problematic?
That's a great question. And maybe understanding the science behind germophobia can help us find that answer.
Yeah.
So,
Let's dive in.
how does someone go from just being aware of germs to full-blown germophobia? What's the science behind that?
Well, it's not quite as simple as a single switch flipping. Germophobia, while not a formally recognized disorder in itself, often falls under the umbrella of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD.
OCD.
Yeah, and for those who might not be familiar with it, the OCD spectrum basically encompasses conditions where people experience intrusive thoughts and then they feel compelled to perform certain actions to kind of alleviate the anxiety that those thoughts bring up.
So that makes sense when you think about those repetitive behaviors we see with germophobia, right?
Right.
Like the constant hand washing, the excessive
Mhm.
cleaning, avoiding certain places or objects, It's not just the fear of germs themselves, it's the compulsions that come with it.
Precisely. And that's why treatment often focuses on both the cognitive and the behavioral aspects.
Okay.
On the cognitive side, it's about challenging those intrusive thoughts, like if I touch this doorknob, I'm definitely going to get sick, and replacing them with more realistic ones.
So it's like retraining your brain to kind of look at the situation from a different angle.
Exactly. And on the behavioral side, therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT can be really effective.
CBT.
Yeah, one technique they use is called exposure and response prevention.
Oh.
So let's say someone is terrified of using public restrooms, right?
Huh.
A therapist might work with them to gradually approach and use those restrooms, starting with maybe just standing outside, then going inside, but not using the facilities and eventually actually using them.
Oh, wow.
The idea is to help them confront their fear in a safe and controlled environment,
Yeah.
while learning to manage that anxiety that comes up.
So it's like slowly building up that tolerance and realizing that the outcome they fear so much, like getting sick, doesn't actually happen.
Exactly. And that's the key. Over time, the brain starts to learn, hey, this situation isn't actually as dangerous as I'm making it out to be,
Right.
which can be a real game changer for people struggling with germophobia.
You mentioned medication earlier, too. Does that play a role in treatment as well?
It can. Sometimes medications like antidepressants can be helpful in managing that underlying anxiety that's often fueling those obsessive thoughts and compulsive behaviors. But it's always important to work with a qualified healthcare professional to figure out the best course of treatment for each individual.
Makes sense. Finding what works best for you.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, this whole idea of microbes actually being essential to life. It really struck me because, we tend to focus so much on the negative, the disease-causing ones, and forget about all the ones that are actually good for us or even crucial for our survival.
It's true. We have this very, narrow view of the microbial world, but when you zoom out and see the bigger picture, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, microbes are involved in everything from breaking down waste to producing food to regulating our immune systems.
It's like we're constantly interacting with them without even realizing it. It makes you really appreciate how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder how we can find that balance,
Yeah.
Between respecting the power of microbes, but not letting fear kind of take over our lives.
That's a great point, and maybe the key lies in understanding the nuances of disgust, that hardwired emotion we've been talking about.
Because it's not about getting rid of disgust altogether.
No, not at all.
It serves a purpose.
Absolutely. Disgust is there to help us avoid things that could be harmful, like rotten food or contaminated water. But the real challenge is learning to tell the difference between that healthy caution and the irrational fear that takes over in germophobia.
So how do we do that? How do we find that sweet spot? So how do we find that sweet spot, between being cautious, but not letting the fear of germs control our lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? It really comes down to awareness, I think. The more we understand about the microbial world, the more we can appreciate just how complex it really is.
Right.
And the less likely we are to kind of fall into that trap of fearing all microbes.
So it's like knowledge is power in this case.
Yeah.
Exactly. If we understand that most microbes are harmless and some are even beneficial, maybe that fear starts to loosen its grip a little bit.
It's about shifting our perspective, right? Instead of seeing the world as this battlefield covered in, invisible enemies, we can start to see it as this intricate ecosystem where microbes are playing a vital role.
I love that. That's such a powerful shift in thinking.
Yeah.
And one thing that really stood out to me from all the materials you sent was this idea that our modern obsession with hygiene might actually be making us more vulnerable in some ways.
Oh, that's interesting. There's actually a growing body of research that supports that idea. Our immune systems need exposure to a diverse range of microbes in order to develop properly.
Really?
Yeah, it's like a muscle. It needs to be exercised. And when we live in these hyper-sanitized environments, we're kind of depriving our immune systems of that crucial training.
So it's like we're creating this bubble that's supposed to protect us.
Yeah.
But it might end up backfiring.
It's a possibility worth considering. Of course, basic hygiene, like washing our hands before we eat, is still super important.
Right.
But maybe we need to rethink our approach to cleanliness a little bit,
Yeah.
Find that balance between protecting ourselves and letting our immune systems do what they're designed to do.
It really does make you think about how our perceptions and behaviors can have these unintended consequences. And it kind of brings us back to something we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive, the importance of understanding the science behind these complex issues.
Absolutely. When we equip ourselves with knowledge, we can make more informed decisions about our health and well-being.
Right.
And, we can start to challenge those deep-seated fears that might be holding us back from really living a full life.
Well said. I think after this deep dive, I'm going to look at the world and all those invisible microbes in a whole new light.
Me too. And I hope our listeners will join us in that journey of discovery.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for diving deep with us today into the fascinating world of microbes and germophobia. We hope you learned something new and maybe even challenge some of your own assumptions about these tiny but mighty creatures. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.